On a sunny holiday morning, a rare treat these days, I heard footsteps approaching the living room. It was Kevin and Elizabeth, dragging in a mountain of baggage, their breaths coming in heavy puffs. They exchanged sarcastic smiles when they saw me and dropped a bombshell. "From today, we're moving in with you. If you don't like it, you can divorce me and leave." Ignoring my stunned silence, Kevin and the others began unpacking their things in the living room. Stella, looking apologetic, followed behind. I opened my mouth, barely able to speak. "It's fine, but are you sure? I mean, she..." Kevin's face went ashen at my words, and he bolted out of the house. A few minutes later, he called, his voice so loud it could be heard where Elizabeth stood. "Are you kidding me? Why didn't you say anything?" "Oh, I thought I mentioned it before." After a brief pause, Kevin said, "Anyway, I'm coming back," and abruptly hung up. Elizabeth looked like she might faint from the shouting. "I'm looking forward to Kevin coming back," I said, causing Elizabeth's shoulders to twitch in surprise. "Brace yourself, the retaliation starts now." I'm Madison, a 45-year-old office worker. Last year, I was transferred to a busy department and have been overwhelmed ever since. I married Kevin when I was 40. We met at a company year-end party where Kevin was a guest, and as his hostess, we hit it off. Being from the same hometown, Kevin, 5 years my senior, was assertive and seemed like a godsend since I had almost given up on marriage. We married after a year of dating, opting out of a wedding ceremony, which left me a bit disheartened. Looking back, I wish I had reconsidered the marriage at that point. "Hey, you slacked off on the laundry again, didn't you?" Kevin is what you'd call a henpecked husband, though he managed household chores before our marriage. He claimed men shouldn't do housework, and that he'd planned to handle it tonight since he got home late from overtime. I replied, "Coming home to be yelled at only makes me more exhausted." Displeased with my response, Kevin's eyebrows shot up in anger. "Don't talk back, wife. Who do you think provides the food you eat?" Honestly, I earn more than Kevin. When we married, he was aware of this and chose a dual-income lifestyle, but after a year, it seemed he'd forgotten this arrangement. Initially, I argued back, but as Kevin's anger escalated, I found myself apologizing quickly to keep the peace. "I'm sorry, it was my fault." "Do you really think so?" "Yes, thank you. It's because of your hard work that we can live this life." Saying this would usually calm Kevin. He'd then hum a tune and head for a bath. At first, I found his henpecked behavior somewhat manly, but after 3 years, I was thoroughly fed up. Yet I hesitated to divorce because of my wonderful in-laws. I'd have lunch with my mother-in-law, Mia, once a month, and my father-in-law, Ricky, always gave me birthday gifts. Kevin was kind and cheerful when we visited them, making the time enjoyable. Since my own parents passed away early, my kind in-laws felt like real parents to me. That's why I hesitated to end the marriage. But there was one thing I couldn't tolerate. Elizabeth, Kevin's sister-in-law, who lived nearby, had divorced due to her infidelity and now lived alone in an apartment. Her affair had been the cause of the divorce, and ever since, I'd had a strong dislike for her. Elizabeth clearly felt the same way about me, often speaking ill of me in front of Kevin, who, unfortunately, indulged her complaints rather than addressing them. Elizabeth had a daughter, Stella, whose custody belonged to her ex-husband. Despite looking exactly like her mother, Stella was a delightful child. She visited Elizabeth about twice a month, and each time, Elizabeth would bring Stella to our house. "Madison, can you feed Stella something nice? I'm heading out now." "Huh, so suddenly, thanks, bye." Elizabeth would rattle off this one-sided request and leave without waiting for my response. Each time, Stella would apologize for her mother's abruptness. I couldn't ignore such a sweet, honest girl, so I ended up feeding her and taking her to various places. "Madison, thank you for everything." "It's okay. Did you have fun?" "Yes, it was really fun. Can I come again?" "Of course." Stella would ask me this timidly while watching my face, and I couldn't say no to her. Besides, I didn't have children of my own, so I found Stella endearing. However, I thought it was unfair that Elizabeth, her mother, was never around during Stella's visits. I decided to bring it up with Kevin. "Hey, whenever Stella comes, Elizabeth is never around. Can't she spend a little more time with her?" I meant well for Stella, but Kevin took it the wrong way. His face turned red with anger as he shouted at me. "Elizabeth is dealing with the pain of her divorce. Unlike you, she's fragile. And yet you're blaming her. No, it's not like that. I'm just wondering where she goes every time after dropping Stella off. There's no need for you to know. Just shut up and listen. I stopped trying to reason with Kevin, who refused to listen. After a few apologies, a visibly upset Kevin abruptly started preparing to leave. I'm heading out. Where are you going? It's my business. Just stay quiet and say, have a nice day. Kevin yelled this and slammed the door behind him. Alone in the quiet room, I cried and seriously began to consider divorce. Although I was contemplating it, I hadn't fully committed to the idea because of my in-laws. Amidst this turmoil, Mia invited me for lunch, and I decided to go out for the first time in a while. Where are you going on your day off? I'm going to lunch with Kevin's mom. With Mom? You better not mention Elizabeth. Why not? I asked, confused. Kevin shouted in irritation, can't you think a little? You really are stupid. Just go already and don't talk about Elizabeth. Without waiting for my reply, Kevin pushed me out of the house. Still unsettled, I met Mia and we talked over lunch. By the way, Elizabeth is coming over, right? You knew. I thought so. Mia sighed deeply and then apologized to me. Apparently, Stella had told her that she felt like a burden to me by coming to see her. I thought I raised her with strict discipline, but maybe it's just a reaction. She's into nightclubs. Nightclubs? That's right, and she seems to have accumulated quite a bit of debt. I was taken aback by Mia's revelation. Elizabeth always appeared well off whenever she visited our house, dressed in designer clothes. When I mentioned this to Mia, she looked even more troubled. That child. We've cut ties with her, so Madison, you should do the same. Kevin's probably still indulging her, isn't he? Mia explained that when Elizabeth's affair came to light, Kevin was deeply affected, even clinging to Elizabeth's ex-husband and paying off her debts. This was a real eye-opener for me. I'm thinking of divorcing Kevin. I'm sorry you're going through this, Mia said, holding my hand, but I'll support you. I thought about how my own mother would have reacted if she were alive and started planning the divorce carefully to avoid alerting Kevin. I tried to bring up Elizabeth's debts to make Kevin see reason, but he refused to listen. Faced with his constant yelling, I found my feelings for him fading. With the support of my in-laws, I gathered substantial evidence and uncovered startling truths. Then the day of action finally arrived. On a rare sunny holiday morning, I heard footsteps approaching the living room. It was Kevin and Elizabeth, weighed down with a mountain of luggage, panting from the effort. They exchanged sarcastic smiles when they saw me and dropped a bombshell. We're moving in with you starting today. If you don't like it, you can divorce me and leave. Ignoring my stunned silence, Kevin and the others began unpacking their things in the living room. Stella, looking apologetic, followed behind. I managed to say quietly, "It's okay, but are you sure? I mean, she." Kevin turned pale at my words and dashed out of the house. A few minutes later, Kevin called. As soon as I answered, he began shouting so loudly that Elizabeth could hear him clearly. "Are you kidding me? Why didn't you say anything?" "Oh, I thought I mentioned it before," I replied. After a pause, Kevin said, "Anyway, I'm coming back," and abruptly hung up. Elizabeth looked like she might faint from Kevin's shouting. "I'm looking forward to Kevin coming back," I said, noticing Elizabeth's shoulders twitch with surprise. "Brace yourself, the retaliation starts now." When Kevin returned, he confronted Elizabeth immediately. "Elizabeth, what's this about debts? I didn't hear anything about this." "It's just a small debt," Elizabeth replied, avoiding eye contact. I couldn't help but laugh. Elizabeth shot me a furious glare. "Amazing, Elizabeth, calling $150,000 a small debt. I could never downplay such a huge amount. Rich people sure have a different perspective." $150,000. Elizabeth's face paled, and she looked as if she might cry. I had no intention of letting her off easy. I continued, "You know, the guy from the nightclub, he recently got married, right?" Elizabeth had let slip a crucial detail. "I'm not dumped. Once I get this house, he'll come back to me, and when we sell it, the money." Elizabeth's plan had been inadvertently exposed, and she shot a guilty glance at Kevin. Kevin looked between me and Elizabeth, clearly confused. I decided it was time to reveal the full truth. Elizabeth planned to kick me out, then eventually you, and sell this house. She intended to use the money to pay off her debts and fund her nightclub guy. "What the hell is this?" Kevin was stunned. He couldn't believe his beloved sister was using him like this. Was it all a lie? I want to live with Stella, so let us stay. I was planning to support both you and Stella. Kevin's words made my head ache. He couldn't support his wife but was ready to support his sister and niece. Elizabeth defiantly shot back at Kevin. You're just an ATM, big brother. Once we sell the house, I can go back to him. Won't you listen to my request? ATM, what's that about? Kevin asked, puzzled. Ah, enough, Elizabeth said dismissively. Kevin and Elizabeth continued their heated argument, their exchange becoming increasingly ugly and ridiculous. It wasn't me who intervened, but Stella. Enough, both of you, Stella shouted. I don't want to live together. I only came today to say goodbye. Stella, what do you mean? Both Elizabeth and Kevin were shocked. Their fighting halted as they turned to look at Stella. Stella sighed deeply, met her mother's gaze with a cool, disdainful look, and began to speak slowly. Mom, you're not interested in my life, right? I think I told you before, but I'm going to study abroad starting high school, so today was just to say goodbye. I didn't hear anything about that, Elizabeth snapped, while Stella maintained her calm, disdainful stare. Because you never really listened, always chasing after men. I don't need a mom like that. Madison is my mom. Huh, what do you mean? Elizabeth glared at Stella with hostility, but I was equally surprised. Stella walked over to me and hugged me tightly. Thank you for holding my hand, for the delicious meals, and for listening and taking me places. You felt like a real mom. Stella's words filled me with warmth. I felt a profound sense of fulfillment and happiness, as if all my efforts for Stella had finally paid off. Having no children of my own, I often worried if I was doing things right with Stella, which made her words even more touching. Stella, I'm happy to have been with you too. Do your best over there, I said, wiping away my tears. Stella beamed at me. Yeah, I'd like to call and send messages. Is that okay? Of course, Stella. Stella and I exchanged smiles and laughter, while Elizabeth watched us with evident resentment. Then, with a smug look, she started laughing. Stella, I'll come with you. Why? It's difficult to live there alone, isn't it? Let's live together. They'll cover our living expenses, right? I was stunned by her audacity. Stella, standing beside me, looked equally appalled. Elizabeth, oblivious to our reactions, began to dream about their life abroad. Mom, while Stella's at school, we can go to the beach or shopping. When she's at her part-time job, I'll take a nap. At night, I'll go out a bit. Elizabeth talked only about leisure, with no mention of any work. Stella looked at her with disdain and suddenly burst into laughter. What's so funny? Elizabeth snapped. It's hilarious. Why would I want to live with you? Besides, I'll be in a dormitory, so you won't be able to come. Elizabeth's face flushed with anger, but Stella didn't stop there. Just as Elizabeth was about to lash out, there was an unexpected interruption. Enough already, Dad. Ricky's voice cut through the tension as he appeared in the living room, surprising Elizabeth. Mia was beside him, her expression a mix of anger and disappointment. I heard from Madison, and what do I find? How long will you keep causing trouble, Elizabeth? Mom, this is a misunderstanding. Stella decided this on her own, Elizabeth protested. Before Elizabeth could say more, Mia approached her and raised her hand. A sharp slap echoed through the room, followed by a stunned silence. Elizabeth was the first to speak. Is it really necessary to hit me? Mia responded sharply. You deserve it. I should have intervened sooner. We've arranged for you to stay with a relative. We're heading there now. Elizabeth's face turned pale as she looked to Kevin for support, but he avoided her gaze. Feeling betrayed, isolated and desperate, Elizabeth was led out of our house by Ricky. Hey, I'm sorry. I should have listened to Madison more. I promise I'll listen from now on, Kevin said. Mia shot him a cold look. That's a naive thought, she said bluntly. I warned you before not to involve yourself with Elizabeth, especially being married, but you didn't listen. Now, the only option is divorce. Kevin turned to me, his face pale. I offered him a small smile, feeling a bit relieved, and prepared to drop the bombshell. Let's get a divorce. I'll also be seeking alimony for your verbal abuse and, let's see, possibly for infidelity too. Infidelity? What are you talking about? Kevin stammered, trying to sound clueless. I felt a pang of regret for once believing in his reliability. I pulled several photos from my bag. Do you recognize this woman? Did you take these secret photos? If someone is caught doing something they shouldn't, isn't it their fault? Kevin fell silent, clearly out of excuses, and looked visibly frustrated. I spread out the documents and had him sign them. Once everything was finalized, I addressed Kevin with a polite smile. Thank you for everything, even though I earned more, did all the housework, and managed everything else. It was me who handled it all. So, take care, don't forget about the payments. Kevin had no more words. I bid farewell to Mia and left the house. I arranged to pick up my belongings later and checked into a nearby hotel. After dropping Stella off at her home, I finally felt free in a clean room with a soft bed and no one to complain. It was the freedom I had been craving after 5 years. The next day, I promptly filed for divorce and felt a true sense of liberation. Mia called to apologize and assured me that Kevin would deposit the alimony within a week, which he did. Since Kevin had little savings left after giving money to Elizabeth, the in-laws covered the alimony in advance. They assured me they would get Kevin to repay it in full, so I didn't need to worry. Kevin lost his job and was sent to live with another relative. He ended up working on a farm from dawn to dusk with no days off. The mountain roads were too challenging for him to navigate, given his lack of experience. It was tough, but I didn't feel sorry for him. Kevin's affair partner, a club girl who saw him only as a paying customer, apologized when I met her. She returned the branded bags he had given her, which I sold to fund lunches with Stella. Elizabeth was sent to live with relatives near the sea, where she worked tirelessly from sunrise every day. Her once well-groomed appearance had deteriorated. Apparently, she had fallen behind on child support payments for Stella, which her relatives had covered, leaving her to work unpaid. I hoped she might eventually change her ways. Meanwhile, Stella successfully went abroad and now lives in a dormitory. She has become close with her roommate, and I receive regular updates about their adventures. She plans to bring her friend for a visit during a long break, and I've agreed to host them for sightseeing. As for me, my days are still busy, but without the marriage, my chores are halved, and there's no one to complain. It's a different kind of busy, much more fulfilling. When I dropped Stella off, I met her dad, Elizabeth's ex-husband. For the first time, he's a nice guy, and we exchanged contacts to stay in touch about Stella. We've started spending time together, and I find peace in his company, something I never experienced with Kevin. Even I'm surprised by these feelings. Stella was thrilled to see him on a video call recently and asked, "When are you getting remarried?" I'm not thinking about it just yet, but if he feels the same way, maybe someday. To me, Stella is like a true daughter, and she feels the same about me. Becoming a real family would make me incredibly happy. With that hope in my heart, I headed into work today.